1994 as an educator and network administrator. After bringing broadband and online curriculum to a group of central Minnesota schools, he co-founded Atomic Learning, an online education company. In 2010, Ron founded the rural economic development company Golden Shovel Agency with the vision of assisting rural communities in improving their online economic development. In 2012, Ron was elected to the House of Representatives to serve District 9B in further economic development policy. Folks, we have a practitioner here from the industry. So, sir, I really look forward to your comments here.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate coming and being invited. I've made a life, I've made a career out of this, and Representative Johnson, now that I know that you were in corrections, we may have crossed paths in a former life. You were much nicer back then, as I recall. So yes, I spent a lot of time in this. I'm a geek from way back when, and this is just what I've done. And bringing technology from Ivanhoe, Minnesota, when I was a teacher there, all the way up to central Minnesota, and bringing that access to students and teachers has always been a big part of what I do. As well as that, I've also been on the web content side. So I have a lot of unique perspectives. Innovation drives broadband adoption and usage, and the competitive forces that set broadband in motion need to be encouraged and allowed to thrive. And we have to remember that. Growth comes organically. It comes from entrepreneurs that have great ideas in our communities, and they grow up from there. As stated in a New York Times editorial, regulatory prudence is the only way to keep up with the momentum in broadband innovation. We're just beginning to see cloud-based technologies, tablets, and transforming education and job training. These innovations will continue to spur usage and adoption rates in rural, underserved areas. I believe there's a number of considerations we as policymakers should discuss. A couple of those, and by way of I'll give you a little bit more feedback. This morning I just arrived back from Irvine, California. I was out there for the International Economic Development Conference. And so we have so many different models across the country where things are growing, and I spent a lot of time thinking about these. So a couple of the issues that I want to raise as we talk about those in the legislature this year, we need to make sure that we keep Connect Minnesota funded. We absolutely have to keep Bill Hoffman and his team going. They provide great data to us, and that measurement. Is Bill here today, by the way? Where's Bill? Nice job. And I know we've talked a little bit on the phone, but that data is so critical when we actually look at the improvements we need to make. We need to sustain the balance of efficient policy and private expansion. We need to consider our private partners as allies to broadband expansion. I realize sometimes it's hard in an underserved market where you don't have that, but we need to understand they're our allies. They're bringing this into us. Government policy can't allocate resources and yet create barriers. For example, the telecommunications tax that we had implemented this last session essentially put a 7% slowdown of investment funds into our rural counties. That was 7% of the dollars that can no longer go into technology that we lost as of July 1. It's important to focus on the underserved markets. I've said it many, many times, I am not a metro legislator. That's not who I am. It's not in my DNA. I'm here for the rural. And those underserved markets are core to who I am. When resources are allocated from the government or from any entity, those resources need to help grow the most vulnerable parts of the network, and that's rural Minnesota. I believe that to my every fiber of the core. Any dollar we put into a well-served market, any dollar that goes into places that already have high-speed broadband access is $1 we take out of the pockets of rural Minnesota networks. And I just don't see that as moving us all forward in an equitable manner. As a person who's been around technology my whole life, I've launched successful companies, I've launched ones that have failed, I've overseen large projects. I can tell you that government's not well suited to launch these initiatives. They can help bring partners together, they can help collaborate, but they just can't run them. We can't allow our broadband projects and initiatives to fall prey to political struggles, nepotism, and bureaucracy that create barriers for our underserved markets. We can't let the rural markets be the pawn for political games that happen. In the spirit of the unsession, the first steps I think we should make is removing some regulatory hurdles. We can do a lot before we even get into the funding part, because quite frankly, there is not enough money to solve this problem, so we're going to have to attack it from a regulatory point of view as well. If we establish some public-private partnerships to improve broadband deployment speeds, and then looking at municipal-owned networks as a last resort. You heard Annandale. I think absolutely your approach is the right one, and that needs to come from the local folks. That can't come from the top. The other thing we have to look hard at is wireless. In my company, when I started one of my first companies, we had an individual who was out in Bertha, Minnesota. Bertha had more cows than it had human beings. And we went out there and put up a tower, and we put all of the router technologies in a cooler at the base of that tower so the rain would stay out of it. But we were getting him gigabit speeds so that he could function for the community, or for our company. Those are the types of innovative things that we have to do, and we have to look at wireless technologies. The FCC's current regulatory approach right now is a hodgepodge of wholesale access rights and pricing mechanisms that were developed without the benefit of consistent, rigorous analytic framework. We need to encourage the FCC to increase the wireless spectrum range so that higher wireless speeds can be achieved in our underserved areas. Something we obviously don't have a lot of power for at the state, but we need to let our federal legislators know that has to change. The FCC can't keep capping these folks, especially when we can get access to the wireless stuff. The last thing is we have a responsibility as consumers. How many of you go to a newspaper website and are frustrated when you've used your 10 articles? Anybody? Buy a subscription. That's what we have to do. We have to fund these content providers. That's what they're there for. And a lot of times, I think that we have these unreal expectations that we can get on the web and we can, we've dropped our landlines, we've dropped our cable, and we've dropped all these things, and we're not giving a model anymore for these content providers. And that's the heart of what they do. That's the bread and butter of innovation. And while I understand the ubiquitous access, and I understand the fact that we have to drive these broadband speeds, but we also have to be willing to have the trade-off, which is there's people out there, content creators, there's people that are making a living. We have a newspaper person here. They're making a living with their intellectual property, and it's okay to pay for that. So those are a couple of the things that I have off the top of my head.
Well, thank you, Representative Kresha. I get the sense that there's more that you could add to this discussion, so I look forward to that. Next, we have Representative Erin Murphy. Erin Murphy is the Majority Leader in the Minnesota House of Representatives, representing District 64A, which includes a portion of the city of St. Paul. She currently serves as the Chair of the Rules and Legislative Administration Committee. Representative Murphy attended the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, receiving her BS in nursing in 1984. She earned her master's in organizational leadership and healthcare at the College of St. Catherine in St. Paul in 2005, and also attended the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota from 2005 to 2006 as a policy fellow. I'd like to add that I've known Representative Murphy and Majority Leader Murphy before she was either of those, and just so impressed with your passion. And I know that this is an issue that is going to help us achieve a lot of our mutual interests, and really look forward to your comments today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt, and thanks to all of you. It's nice to see you. I want to say that my dad down in southern Wisconsin is still on dial-up. So when I go visit, none of us use the computer there, especially my young adult daughters who don't know that familiar sound many of us grew up with. And gratefully, it's part of our past for mostly anyhow. Matt, thank you very much for including me. And you will know, or I will confess to you, that this is not an area of expertise for me, but I do have a deep passion and commitment for Minnesota, and so because of that, I think it is important that I'm here to join in the conversation, mostly, I think, to listen and to understand what we're facing together, and your expertise will certainly help shape my thinking on this issue. So I'm going to speak today mostly from, a self-confessed novice perspective, but someone who's got a deep commitment to Minnesota and our future. I also want to thank Representative Sheldon Johnson for, giving me the nod to sit on the panel with him. He is an expert on this issue, as I understand now Representative Kresha is, in your expertise. Sheldon is certainly a leader in the House on this issue, and has been working on these issues for a long time, so I certainly will defer to him on some of the technical issues. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who's not here today, the former Speaker of the House, has also been an asset to me in my understanding of these issues, and I know has been convening the task force looking at these issues of late. I want to give her a shout out, and then my neighbor Eric, was way in the back over there. I spied him. If I screw up too much, he'll be down knocking on my door, I'm sure. So it's good to see you. Happy Precinct Caucus Day. As Matt mentioned, I'm a registered nurse, and so I can really throw down with jargon. I can talk about, healthcare, and I'm a policy wonk, so I can talk about both the human body and physiology and chemistry and biology, and then health and human services till I'm blue in the face. But a lot of the language that we're sharing today is common, but I'm not deep in it, and I've got a lot of respect for that. We all come from a place. We do. And from my perspective, especially as I've been serving in the Minnesota House, really have a strong belief that regardless of where we come from, there are certain things that we come to expect in terms of the way that we live. And I think there should be expectations among all of us that certain things, fire protection, health care, public safety, and this information, we should have a sense of equality and fairness in the access to that. And it is clear to me as I listen today, especially when I recognize or understand there are parts of the state that are unserved and other parts of the state that are underserved, that we do have a real issue before us that needs a resolution. And it also seems clear to me as I listen that there is some tension between the market and competition and the public good, and how we deliver